Doctor. So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
Small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
All right, dudes, it's time for another episode of It's Time to Rewind. I am known as Bubbawheat, not the Bubbawheat, not first name Bubba, last name Wheat, just Bubbawheat. This season is Red Who, where I'm covering British sci-fi like Red Dwarf and Doctor Who, and joining me 3 million years in the future via the TARDIS once again are my guests Toni and Joe from the Watchathon of Rassilon. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Pretty good, yeah.
Woo!
Oh.
Yeah.
Celebrating like it's New Year's.
Yeah, it's good to have you back, and I'm really excited to finally getting into what I kind of consider like the main chunk of this season, which is the this episode we are covering, the 2022 New Year's Eve special, Eve of the Daleks, with the 13th Doctor Jodie Whittaker that originally aired on January 1st, 2022. Which is funny because it's a New Year's Eve episode, and yet they aired it on New Year's Day. And on this episode, we are covering the first loop that starts at the beginning of the episode and ends at 9 minutes and 51 seconds with the end of the opening credits.
Cool.
So yeah, I finally made it to the real Groundhog Day time loop episode where the entire episode is, a fully formed time loop instead of like the episodes that I've been covering that have kind of time loop elements here and there mixed into the episode or have no time loops at all. So glad to really get into the time loopiness of Doctor Who.
It's kind of surprising it took Doctor
That's
Who
long.
so long to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean well, I don't know, I was kind of surprised at how often they kind of dip their toes into the time loop because I know that I think Tom Baker had a lot of episodes where there's like references made to time loops because I was kind of told by previous guest Lackey, who's kind of my go-to Doctor Who expert, that there were that in classic Who a lot of times the a time loop was kind of referred to as like a prison. It's like he would lock an enemy away in a time loop, but it's they would just be referred to in dialogue and not really shown on screen.
Oh, there is also that Peter Capaldi episode where he's beaten against that
Yeah.
wall. That one's
Yeah, that was that's what I did on my last regular episode, Heaven Sent.
such a good episode. That's probably one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes altogether. So
Yeah, and it has been kind of interesting because the ones that have been touched on, like with the time loops and New Who, have been a lot of the best episodes of the
Oh.
runs. Like Eccleston's was Father's Day, and Matt Smith was The Big Bang.
I feel like we're about to break that streak.
I will say, neither one of us really care for this particular era of Doctor Who. Not because of Jodie Whittaker. We love Jodie Whittaker.
Absolutely.
Just not a big fan of Chris Chibnall.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
But this is, I think, I have some, nitpicks and stuff I don't like about this episode, but it is one of the better episodes in 13's run, which honestly isn't saying a whole lot.
Do you think it's because of the structure of a time loop, though, that it gives the
Yes,
episode a structure that maybe wouldn't otherwise be there?
I think so, maybe.
I also feel like this episode feels very standalone. I mean, there is this, we'll get to it in a moment here because it comes up at the beginning, but there is this this crisis going on in the TARDIS, and I've mentioned it before, but this was my first episode of Doctor Who.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Yeah, because I had been doing this podcast already, and friend of the show, Jason Soto and Lackey, who've both been previous guests. They do their own show in kind of their rabbit hole network that I'm a part of, but I did this podcast before I joined, so this podcast isn't technically part of the rabbit hole podcast network, but we're still kind of closely knit. And so they invited me on their Doctor Who show from Inner Time to discuss this episode. And so I watched it for to be on their show. And that was kind of my introduction to Doctor Who. And then shortly after that, I finally made the plunge and started watching Christopher Eccleston, from the start of New Who. And then I took like 2 years off, and then deciding to do this season brought me back into Doctor Who. And at this point in recording, I'm halfway through Matt Smith's run, and so I just got through the. I just found out. Technically, I just found out who Rever Song really is.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people would know where I am based on that, even though it did kind of get spoiled to me like just a week before. I just happened to read some Facebook comments on like a suggested post, and I saw, uh, I had known that, she's like the doctor's wife, which, they kind of push that in the second episode. They kind of hints that she's eventually going to be his wife,
Hmm.
but then they don't really hide where she came from until that episode.
Mm. I've some. That's a sloppy season, but I love Matt Smith. So
Yeah,
there's really good standalone episodes in that season. I think the arc is a little wobbly, but
I really enjoyed like that kind of 3 episode run with the flesh into Amy's delivery.
mm. So this was your first episode, and then like they're like, oh, there's stuff going on with the flux, and we gotta flush it out of the TARDIS. But you're probably like, what does that mean? And the thing is, I've seen the flux, and I still don't know what that means.
Yeah, I just kind of looked at it as, oh, they're just, cleaning up a crisis from the previous episode, and it's, it doesn't really matter too much that the TARDIS just kind of dropped them here. It's like I knew kind of enough, like I knew I knew of the Daleks, so seeing them wasn't really a big surprise. Um, and then this episode really kind of is the focus on Sarah and Nick, really. It's almost this is another one of the episodes, kind of like Blink, where the Doctor is like a side character in their own story.
Hmm. And I really like Eiling B. So,
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
uh,
Ashlyn, I think it's pronounced.
oh, I had no idea.
It's one of those like Saoirse Ronan.
I've seen her in two things. One of them they say her name all the time, so I don't know why I forgot how it's pronounced. She's in season of Taskmaster that's really good,
Oh
and
yeah.
she's probably my favorite contestant, I guess, in that season. And she's also in a show called Living with You. I think that's what it's called.
I think so. I believe you're right.
With no, that's not what it's called.
Oh, okay.
Was it Living with Yourself? Was it? It's the Paul Rudd show on Netflix where he's got a clone and he play Living with Yourself. That's what it's called.
Hmm.
And
I haven't
she
heard of that
is
one.
she is Paul Rudd's wife, and she gets into like a weird love triangle between Paul Rudd and Paul Rudd's clone. Very very good show.
Yeah, so anyways, I guess let's go ahead and start things off with this this first loop. And we start with the opening shot of the elf storage. And you know, I'm trying to remember, and I've watched this episode I think 2 or 3 times, but I didn't rewatch it again before starting this. I just kind of rewatched this first loop, and then I kind of jumped ahead to check something out. But I don't remember if they ever have a line where this is just called elf storage, or if it is called self storage and the S fell off, because that feels like what the intention is, but I don't remember if they actually have the line in the episode or not.
Uh, I I only watched this loop, and I read a summary of the rest of the episode. And they do mention at some point that it was the S fell off, but and I guess they're trying to make it elf to keep with the sort of holiday-ish theme.
Yeah, because they didn't do a Christmas special this year. They did this one, and then they did what the Sea Beast or whatever
Sea Devils,
they
yeah.
Sea Devils. Yeah, they did that one after this, which I don't know if that one was connected to a holiday or it was just a
I think
different
it's
standalone special.
on HBO Max. This episode is listed as the festive special, and the Sea Devils one I think is listed as the spring special. So I don't know what that's celebrating. Spring.
Yeah, my guess would have been like Easter would have been the kind of the next big
Yeah.
holiday. But yeah, we mentioned, we're introduced to Ashlyn B as Sarah, and then we get Johnny Salmon as Nick, and we're also introduced to the kind of the Maris of the episode, Jeff, that's only exists on the phone and through his uh, I guess everything that he stored in this storage unit that he apparently works at, which I do kind of love this dynamic. Like they really build a backstory with these two characters and that I personally like really love. Like even though I think it's a little confusing in certain parts, which I don't think we'll get to in this loop, but I'll definitely bring it up in later loops. But like, what do you think about? I mean, you already talked about how much you love Ashlyn, but what about Nick? Like, what do you think of these two characters in this episode? Is like the focus?
I I think the actor is doing a good job, as good a job as he can do.
Yeah,
The character is written
odd.
odd and kind of
Hmm.
creepy.
Yes, I definitely feel like he's somewhere between autistic and serial killer.
Yeah. The just stashing all, I mean, this doesn't get revealed till later. We see a bit of it, but just the stashing all of his ex's things and holding on to them, creepy. It's creepy. And the fact that he's been sort of like following the follow
Pining
like
over this woman for years.
years. Yeah, because it happens every New Year's. That's a long period of time to like establish a pattern.
Also, if you've ever been a woman in customer service,
Yeah.
you're very familiar with how this exact scenario feels.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfy.
Don't don't hit on people when they're working. That's a general thing that I think you should do.
Yeah, and I'm hit and miss with this whole thing with her phone, but I do think that it works well to set up the contrast between these two people's personalities. Like Sarah is definitely someone who would rather be out at a New Year's party, and she's frustrated that she's getting all these notifications from other people having fun where she has to work.
How many friends does she have that it keeps going
Right?
off
My
like
phone's
that?
never been like that.
Well,
Like
she probably,
constant.
my guess is she has like maybe three or four friends, but they're friends that send constant updates.
Just the group chats pinging
Yeah, and then he's someone where he's exactly where he wants to be on New Year's Eve.
in a self-storage facility.
Yeah, just
No, I get that. This is that scene, I mean, that part is the most relatable he is when he's talking about not wanting to be anywhere near people on New Year's Eve. You're like, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then I do have to touch on this moment of whenever he walks away and he says, "I'll see you next year." And Sarah has a very sarcastic, "Have you been practicing that?" And he just gives this very quiet and defeated yes. And then and like he says it kind of to himself, but Sarah catches it, and then she has this first like real moment of sympathy towards him. That's as he's like walking away, where she's like, "Oh, that went too far."
Uh, yeah, and he's the awkward chat he has with her is Also, like I've worked customer service and I've definitely had customers like that who just I like they're lonely, so they just try to get all the attention from you that they can.
They're lonely
Yeah.
and you're available.
Yes,
That's
Mhm.
exactly. I have to be here and I have to help you. So I'm being nice and polite and you're kind of taking advantage of that. So like
Yeah,
him
he's stretching
asking
it
all
out.
these yeah, so him asking all these questions and like what's hazardous and what does that mean and it just it like hits me in my customer service feels.
Yeah, and he's like very much like, would you consider this hazardous? And he pulls out a classic Monopoly board game, which I do love that it's kind of like classic. Like it's not like super classic like 30s, whenever it's not like an original Monopoly, but it definitely feels like a 50s or 60s era Monopoly game.
Yeah, I was noticing that. Like I don't think I've ever seen that particular version of Monopoly, but it definitely looks old. I'm more used to the like white box, just like a little
Mm,
more modern-ish, probably like 90s era Monopoly.
I've
You
tried
Maybe he
not to
was
look
really?
at Monopoly. I try not to acknowledge it as much as humanly possible.
maybe he was dating a cougar.
Yeah, probably. Did he have a new ex every year?
Well, I did jump ahead, a little bit to try and see whenever they reference all the post-its. And he has a line where he says, some of his girlfriends were only like, a couple dates, but the ones that they show all seem like multi-month or multi-year relationships,
Hmm.
at least based on, his uh, labeling system, which the one that we see in this loop is Simona, November 20, January 21.
Not long.
Uh-oh.
So, well, I mean, that's almost a year. That's what, an 8 month relationship, and it's since it did start in January 2021,
Oh,
so he wouldn't have had it. I mean, the relationship would have still been going on, but it started after New Year's Eve last year, his last potentially his last trip to the storage facility, even though with as much stuff as he has there, I can't imagine him only coming to the storage unit once a year.
yeah. I feel like there's got to be other trips in there,
Also,
especially if you have a
supposedly
crush.
he's there enough to be annoying.
Yeah,
And she also refers to him, "Oh, you're my only customer."
that is a bit odd.
I mean, does he also just have some junk? You know,
Yeah,
it can't all be.
I get it. All is though.
Oh,
It's weird. I want to know about the ex-girlfriend that had roller skates. That's the only thing I really noticed on the shelves in this loop was the roller skates because you
because I
you
roller
skate.
skate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's in roller
I
derby.
mean, also the other thing, if you have a like a 10-month relationship, and the only thing that she left behind was a Monopoly board game.
Yeah.
I actually, the more that I think about it, the fact that somebody left behind their roller skates is insane. Those are expensive.
Yeah, Monopoly I could see because like Monopoly you're like I don't actually really like this game. Bye.
I have to imagine that that
Skates.
person doesn't skate. So
Yeah, they
people,
probably bought it, maybe they're like wealthy and they just bought it for that date and they left it there.
I feel like roller skating is one of those hobbies where you're like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it this year, and then you start it and you're like, oh, it's hard. Uh, that's why those are there.
I like trying to figure out the history of each of his ex-girlfriends.
Yeah, I'll probably be doing that, a little bit whenever I get to that loop, whenever we see more of it, because this one we really just see like
Yeah, the
like
only
there
thing
is like some like let's see, what do we see here? It looks like there's some, I guess we do see the roller skates here, but I don't see a post-it note. So maybe those are his roller skates.
Oh.
And that's exactly what happened.
There's there's shoes, there's I don't know if that's a yoga mat or like a sleep pad, um like a bedroll.
There's a lot of unidentifiable
Now there's a
Whoops.
pillow and a few boxes. There's some clothes and dry cleaning bags.
I've never dry cleaned anything in my life. Probably
Which is a
should.
problem because we do have multiple
Dry
dry
clean
clean only
facilities.
ones.
And also, this is a massive storage space, storage unit that he's renting. So, maybe he is like kind of, relatively well off. So he's dating the rich girls.
And like he's apparently the only customer, so he's keeping that place in business.
Right.
Hmm.
So he's got a huge storage area.
Because that goes down on, like that is, this isn't like a 20 foot. This is like easily, 200 to 300 square feet, if not more. Because like in the shot that we see in this loop, you can't even see the end of it.
That's a lot of ex-girlfriends.
But before we see his, we get this moment that we talked about with I guess, the flux going through the TARDIS, and the Doctor has to get it prepared for resets, and she has, her t-shirt and suspenders, and then she has the big welding gloves and the goggles, which I think this is kind of a fun look for
Such a fun
running around
look.
the TARDIS. And you might know, is this kind of a unique look to this episode, or is this kind of her messing with the TARDIS look?
She's not in it enough, I believe. I think she definitely has like the goggles, and I feel like her first episode
Yeah, like when she makes
when she's
her
making
new Sonic
the
screwdriver.
Sonic. I can't think of more times that she's in that kind of look.
I think it's basically her main look, just without the coat, but with gloves and goggles.
But the gloves and they're crucial.
Yeah.
She should be wearing gloves and goggles all the time. It's a great look.
I'm thinking about when she made her Sonic with the goggles, she might have been wearing Peter Capaldi's outfit.
Oh, you might be right.
I think she was. So this might be unique to this. I don't remember.
Yeah, and then we get this look of the TARDIS kind of reshaping itself as they have their 7 seconds to escape, and going back to a classic Doctor trope. They're in the wrong spot. That instead of the beaches, they're in the basement of this storage unit, the storage facility.
Has he ever actually made it to a beach?
He's made it to a beach once, I'm pretty sure. But then there was still something like, because there's that episode,
Then the beach was evil.
Then the
Is
beach
that?
was evil. Yeah. Remember, he gets in that like swimsuit and goes running out into the ocean, the second Doctor. It is a frequent thing of him specifically trying to go to the beach, go to the ocean, and always something crops up.
Yeah, although they do have, adventures that are in between episodes. He does
Yeah.
reference adventures that he has, that's where he, all the times that he does go to the beach, they is whenever it's not on screen because nothing interesting happened.
I don't know. The sentient beach, is that what it's called? There's lobsters that talk, and
Oh yeah. Is that
that's this one. Yeah.
yeah.
I forget what. Oh, but she was mentioning multiple sea creatures that talk. That sounds cool to me.
I think it would stress me out.
It would stress you out.
Well, I like seafood.
Oh, you don't want your food talking to
I'd
you?
have a moral crisis and I'd have to leave.
That's a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy scene about that.
You don't want a crab with a Jamaican accent.
If it
Oh,
can sing, can't.
was it the meal of the day at on the restaurant at the end of the
Restaurant at the
universe?
end of the universe that just kind of says, "Hey, what pieces of me would you like?" It's also the waiter, which is fantastic.
Yeah. You know who played him in the TV series?
Who?
Peter Davison,
Oh, really?
Fifth Doctor. Yeah, all
Nice.
connected.
Yeah.
They've only got so many actors.
I do really like in that scene when, I always love the Doctor just running around messing with stuff. And I like just when she's like, we got to get out in 7 seconds or, we'll
We'll
die.
die.
I think that's very funny. Though there is like a very long pause after that where it gets weirdly serious.
emotion after she says that, and I don't understand what the emotion is.
I think she's like genuinely afraid they might die. I
But
like
it's weird because the beat is a joke, and then she's like, "Oh no, we
dreadfully
really might
serious.
die."
Yeah,
It feels awkward to me.
a little bit. I do
Yeah.
like when she's running out and it's kind of in slow motion and the TARDIS is like the walls are all moving and stuff.
It looks so cool. There's a part of my very no fun allowed brain that was like, "Why did they simply not start closer to the door?" Like the answer is because it looks neat. Be quiet.
And even though it makes sense, like I wouldn't want them to spend this entire episode in beach gear, but why aren't they in beach gear if they were supposed to be going to the beach?
No, I like that better.
Yeah, that's great. That would have been fantastic.
I mean, they again kind of going back to my watch, they had that with Amy Pond at one point where I think it was the vampires in Venice episode
Yeah,
maybe, and she's like, "Well, I was dressed for the beach."
They keep trying to go to the beach.
it's really, really hard to get to the beach.
It's hard. The TARDIS just hates the beach.
You know what? I bet the TARDIS hates sand. I bet it's bad to land on.
Yeah.
Yeah, the TARDIS doesn't like it, which, and again, going back to my recent rewatch, not too long ago, I had the episode where the TARDIS was personified. It had the human avatar for the episode, so kind of proving that the TARDIS isn't just a machine, but the TARDIS has a personality.
Yeah,
It's a good episode. Oh, was it The Doctor's Wife? Is that what it's called?
the Doctor's
Yeah,
wife.
the Doctor's wife.
Good episode. It's a good season. I like Matt Smith.
Matt Smith is a great doctor.
Yeah, and I like this look of the TARDIS with it all having like the lava cracks in it.
Yeah.
And I also like how uh, they're, the doctor sees referring to the TARDIS has to reset itself, um, the internally, which that kind of sets up the fact that the TARDIS is the one that's resetting the timeline because it's also resetting itself in order to fix itself.
Hmm. I will say, like,
It's a boot loop.
it's a boot loop. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's keeps getting shorter because whenever you have those boot loops, a lot of times the first one takes forever, and then the second one goes quicker, and then if there's a third one, it goes even quicker.
You I didn't even that. I wonder if that was on purpose. I do like that structure though of each loop is a minute shorter. I think
Yeah,
that's a
I
good
think
idea.
that's fascinating too. And it really I'll probably talk about it more in later loops, but it really works well to amp up the tension, to
Hmm.
make this it becomes a ticking clock. And there's a lot of elements that they use. And the one that we get in this one is whenever her mom calls and she mentions it's 4 minutes to midnight. Why are you calling me now? And it kind of serves a dual purpose. It has this reference of the time, so we know that she calls at 4 minutes to midnight. So that kind of is one of like the loop markers
Yeah.
that a lot of time loop movies and stories have these time loop markers, and that's one of them that that her mom calls at exactly 4 minutes to midnight. And I also like how that conversation goes because it feels very accurate. Like
Yes.
it it's serving a dual purpose. Serving a time loop marker for the 4 minutes, but the way that they write the mother feels like she feels like a real person, and like her reasoning feels very valid with the way her character is written.
You just get a sense of like, oh yeah, I know this person.
Yeah.
Like from that brief call, you're like, yeah, no, I get who that person is. Uh, I I think like time loop markers, I adore them. They're one of like my favorite things about watching like time loop things. I think it satisfies a part of my brain to like hear the same thing over and over. Like every time it happens, I get excited. Like when he watching the first loop and he's like, you know, what is it? It's like good to see you again or something like that. Where you're like, ah, that's the beginning of a loop.
Yeah.
And there's something very satisfying about it to me. And I think usually writers kind of take it as a opportunity to do. I mean, like usually I feel like it's like a visual, it's like a sight gag or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Phil Connors stepping into the puddle,
yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah. Um, I
Sometimes
also
jokes just get better when you repeat them.
they do. I also like that with this like shrinking loop, you also have the danger of like because they die occasionally, as generally happens in time
They
loop
die
shows.
almost every,
Yeah.
in this one, they die almost every iteration of the time loop.
But there's like because the time loops are getting shorter, you have to be like, make sure you don't die, like before the next loop's gonna reset too. It's like if it goes to 11:53 and the next loop's gonna start at 11:54, don't die before 11:54, or you're just gonna be permanently
Yeah.
dead.
And
Mhm.
it gives the loop stakes.
Yeah.
I do really like it's such a strong opening, I think. Just kill everybody and then go to opening credits.
Yeah, and I also read that this is the longest cold open in Doctor Who. It's 9 minutes and 16 seconds before they go to opening titles.
I mean, that is absolute perfection, I think.
Yeah.
That's the way to
Well,
open
it's
an episode.
although personally I will say it's not absolute perfection. It would be absolute perfection for me if the opening, the cold open was exactly 9 minutes long.
Yeah.
You are right. Yes.
Yeah. That's true.
It's like I
Um,
I know that the later loops, there's no rhyme or reason with how long the loop actually takes, which, I'll give it because, sometimes you have to, you'll show 2 minutes with one character and then technically you're backing up to show the same 2 minutes with another character. So it, you have to give it some leeway in that respect, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like the structure quite matches the shrinking time loop as well as I would have liked.
And it's interesting that they didn't do it more because, like, Chris Chibnall did do a real time episode, didn't he? Isn't 42 real time?
I no longer remember.
I think it's real time because it's 42 minutes.
Yeah.
So, and that episode's
There
called
is
42.
something again very satisfying about if yeah, if that structure lined up, I
Yeah.
think it you would feel it more.
Hmm.
And then, what do you think? Why do you think the Daleks made all the lighting turn red? Because it's not like emergency lighting. It's not.
100% aesthetics.
Yep. Just the
Yeah.
drama of it that they're a little dramatic.
Yeah, it's like Daleks have a little bit of the Mega Mind complex. It's like, what the difference between a villain and a super villain is? Presentation.
Yes. I don't know why the line "I am not Nick" is so
It's a great thing for a Dalek to say.
which I think is definitely funny because I'm pretty sure it's voiced by Nicholas Briggs.
You're right.
And for my first introduction to the Daleks, I think that they are, uh, you know, actually pretty menacing in this episode because my personal view of the Daleks in a lot of the stories is they kind of ride the line between silly and menacing.
Yeah.
They they look silly. They don't really have, they look like something that should be easily defeated, and they don't seem to be very maneuverable. But at least in this one, a, it starts off with, identify yourself. I'm Nick, dead.
They just start blasting.
Yeah, when you can kill off your whole cast, that's great a great way to sort of establish how big of a problem this thing is.
Yeah, and with all my criticisms of the Chibnall era, he did a really good job of making Daleks menacing again.
Yeah.
I feel like they kind of stopped being menacing in the uh Moffat
I
era.
think they vary a lot, and I think they have to vary a lot. Like you have times in Classic Who where you can throw a coat over them and just push them, and
Well, even
that's
in this one, not in this loop, but we have the scene where John Bishop is just running circles around him just to avoid this, his gun stock.
Yeah.
yeah. I think. Do you know what's kind of great about it actually is that like I think Daleks are. Ooh, someone should actually do this. Effective at like being menacing. I think when there's a ton of them, right?
Yeah.
When they're an
Mhm.
army, and then when there's a singular one, it's like this thing's a little absurd actually.
So Dalek's pretty frightening.
I mean, yes, that's one of the greatest episodes of all time.
I think it
Yeah.
just depends on how they're written.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so I do have a question for you because there is a bit of this that confused me and I didn't research it at all. But you seem like the kind of person who probably did. What's the deal with Manchester?
You know, I, I actually didn't do that much research, but I feel like the one thing that I have heard about John Bishop's character, whose name I've already forgotten, uh,
Dan.
Dan, is that I feel like he talks about where he's from constantly. And I
Okay.
think he might actually be from Manchester. So it's like, oh, why we come here?
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Was wondering if it was a bit like being at Times Square on New Year's Eve, where you're just like, oof, gross.
I think.
There's way too many people.
And
Dan is probably I like Dan okay, but he does some stuff this episode that I don't care for. But that's not in my loop.
This loop, this loop he doesn't. In this loop he just dies.
Yeah,
yeah, first
just a
we
couple.
get before that we do get the doctor and Dan and oh what
Yes.
what's yes, yeah. And then finding Nick's body. And again we get another, very quick death with Sarah saying Nick and just a you're not Nick or I'm not Nick and then blast.
I do like the cut from uh, when Sarah's like looking at her phone and all the notifications keep going off, and she's like, "I just wish everybody would die." And then we cut to dead Nick. That's a pretty good cut.
And we have this and I'm not super great on this interaction, at least not the beginning of it, because it's very exposition-y, where
Mm.
it's very like 10-year-old play fighting, imagination fighting. It's like my sonic screwdriver has blocked your weapon systems. Oh, but I have sonic screwdriver blocking powers now. So it doesn't work on me.
That is a problem with Chibnall's dialogue. He sometimes will just he gets very he'll over explain things or gets very exposition-y. Everybody
In
is
times where it's not necessary. Where
yeah,
you're
they're
like,
just saying
we
what
could
they're
have just
doing.
said, we could have just, we would have followed, I promise.
And then but he also has the opposite problem of not explaining things that need to be explained.
Yeah,
So he'll
I feel
explain
like
like boring things like how a door got opened, but not like big plot stuff that you're like, I don't what happens?
yeah, I kind of feel like this would have worked a little bit better if the Dalek and would have just said Daleks learn and then
Yeah.
gotten ready to and then we hear the sonic screwdriver powering down, which it's I do like kind of love and hate that sound effect because it's very like sad cartoon, just the
Yes.
just the phew. But then I do love the doctor's line where she says, "Not like this."
Do too. I always really like the effect for an extermination where you just get to see their skeletons for a second. I don't know why I enjoy that so much. The glow.
There's something about it that is terrifying, I think.
Yeah. And it's also a little cartoony as well, getting shocked so much you see their skeleton. It's like that
It's Home Alone.
really
Home
importantly
Alone.
rides that line, I think. That's what that's what makes them good.
Yeah. That's the sweet spot of Doctor Who is when it's Doctor Who can be anything. It can be scary and funny and dramatic. It's everything. The show's been on for 60 years. It's done it all. It'll do it
Mhm.
all. So
And then I've never really touched on the opening credits, but since I decided to include them in this loop, I did kind of want to touch on the opening credits a little bit, which I do really love the look of this. I mean, it's very CGI and it's very abstract, but I think it's gorgeous personally. Just this this combination of space with this I guess nebula like liquidy nebula cloud effect going on.
it's like mirrored as well.
Mm.
So it's kind of a throwback to the like first Doctor era credits as well, which is also like mirrored and everything too. And also, I mean, the music itself is also kind of a throwback to the first Doctor era because it's pretty much the original
The original theme.
theme with a little bit of uh extra oomph
Extra.
to it. Extra oomph. That technical musical term.
Yeah.
Oomph. There's a lot extra I don't know,
They
just
added more moreness to
they
it.
added more moreness to it. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't want to. I feel like I'm jumping back to my current watch too much, but I do kind of have to mention because I am in the season where the American um, version got the different ti opening titles with the explanation, the Amy Pond, when I was 9, I had an imaginary friend, and I'm not always one for skipping opening credits, but in this season I am skipping that one. It's like that's annoying.
Pretty sure when I watched it for the first time, it didn't have those. So I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not sure
it
when I
was
watched
only
it.
I think it's only in Matt Smith's second season.
Okay.
It's not in because it didn't show up in the first season with Matt Smith and Amy Pond, but whenever I started his second season, then that's when it popped up, and I don't like it.
And then in his third season, don't they like change the intro like the actual like credits every time to like sort of match the tone of the episode? Pretty sure they do that. Or at least for a half of the season.
Yeah, and then that's the end of this first loop. Do you have anything else that you wanted to mention about the first loop or the episode or Jodie Whittaker's season or her run on general?
I think she's great. I think Chibnall is not great. I the thing about the one thing that I want to say about this episode, that's not in this loop is Dan, don't be telling people their business, especially when it's in regards to their identity. Don't out somebody. Just want to put that out there.
I would like to take the hard stance that Jodie Whittaker's run would be better if she got to wear the gloves and goggles more often.
Yes.
That's my main takeaway.
Yeah, and I feel like I've heard, not the gloves and goggles sentiment, but I've heard the sentiment quite a bit that a lot of Doctor Who fans that I've seen talk about her run have said that they liked Jodie as the Doctor, but they did not like the writing for her
Yeah.
seasons.
It's a shame too because it feels like it gives people an excuse to be like,
Well,
oh,
that
it
shouldn't
doesn't work because
work.
it's a woman. It's like that's not the problem. She's great. So
Yeah, at least it's I've heard mostly positive things about the Ncuti Gatwa season.
yeah,
So
I'm enjoying it a lot. So
yeah, I still have a ways to go before I get there. I still have, two and a half more doctors.
oh yeah, because we also got a little bit of David Tennant in there.
Yeah, but his wasn't that just like two specials or something like that?
Three,
Three
yeah,
specials,
three.
yeah.
Three specials. So I mean, he counts, but just barely more than uh, Paul McGann.
Yeah, he only had two
One,
televised things. So
he had a movie and a mini.
Yeah.
Well, and tons of audio. Like he's whenever you count the audio and comic stories, he's actually had more stories than any other doctor.
That sounds right.
He was saying, I forget where I saw this. It might have been Atlanta. No, that's not right. Anyway, it was somewhere. That like all the when they were filming the special, and like all the classic doctors were like, "Can you believe we're not in this? This is bullshit." And he was like, "Yeah,"
Yeah.
because he couldn't say anything.
Okay, because they were making that Five-ish Doctors special.
Yeah,
Where all the like classic Doctor Who actors are like teaming up to get themselves in the 50th special. It's a really funny video.
yeah, but he was in the awkward position of
Wait a minute, I can't
I
say
can't
anything.
say.
That's another good thing I'll say about Chibnall is um the last episode of his run uh is actually surprisingly really good. And he does things that I wish the 50th had done, which is acknowledge Classic Who a bit more. So his into his run is very it's a love letter to all of Doctor Who, I feel like,
Yeah.
especially Classic Who. Uh, he doesn't answer any of the questions he set up throughout his entire run, and that might be a good thing because it's not loaded down with all this baggage that I don't care about, and it's just a really good episode. I really like the way he ended his run, so good job on that at least.
Yeah, I feel like they're um you know, I would having just kind of dipped my toes in the classic Who, I do like whenever they reference classic Who in the new Who, but it does seem to be few and far between, and like a lot of times it's just like images, you just get like his not his like his ID with the first Doctor picture
Yeah,
and things like that.
I think towards the end of Moffat's run, it starts getting a little heavier. I mean, he straight up meets the first Doctor at in one episode, so
Yeah,
it
and
gets
especially like the David Tennant's his regeneration episode where he was visiting all his previous companions that we saw through, you know, that we saw televised, and I have heard that the implication was that he actually visited all of his previous, companions in, throughout his entire lifetime, but they only showed the ones that appeared during his run.
yeah, I feel like they didn't want to confuse audiences, I guess. So it's like especially like I know like in Rose, the very first episode, there is a scene of like the conspiracy theorist guy that's like, "Who's this doctor?" And he shows like it's all pictures of like Christopher Eccleston throughout time. And it's like, well, where's the other doctors? But in the novelization of it that Russell T Davies wrote, he does. It's like he puts in more of the like, and then the doctor looked like the doctor character looked like this and looked like this, and he's describing previous classic Who doctors. Um, and I understand why they didn't do it in the show because it is like a reboot and they don't want to like throw people in and
Throw you
have them
into
be
the deep end.
yeah
Yeah.
Mhm.
have them be confused. But it is nice to have these little acknowledgments here and there.
Yeah, especially as they become a more established show on its own, and they do um, acknowledge the classic Who more as the run goes on. It feels like.
You know,
All right, well, thanks for coming back and talking about this first loop. You know, I'm glad that this is, I know that the Chibnall era isn't it is kind of seen as a low point in New Who, but I do feel like this episode is kind of a high point in his run.
Yeah.
for sure.
But thanks again, and one more time, why don't you let people know where else you can be found online?
Tony and I host a Doctor Who podcast called The Watchathon of Rassilon, where we've been watching through all of Doctor Who in order. We finished Classic Who, and we're now into New Who. We're in the second season of David Tennant, so we're in the Martha Jones era. You can find us at watchyourassalon.com or linktree/watchathon. Um, I also have a bunch of my own stuff on mintypineapple.com. If you like time travel stuff, I've done a movie review series called The Projectionist Project, and I've done some movie reviews of time travel things and time loop things like Triangle and Primer and Men in Black 3.
Mhm.
So go check those out. Also coming soon to my website, I'm going to be doing a thing called Consume All Media, which is going to be a blog. I did a series for a website that I'm now going to be putting on my own website where I watched all comic book, film, and TV adaptations in order. So I did all of the 1940s and a little
In
bit
order
of
of production.
yeah, in order of release, yeah.
Yeah.
I did all of the 1940s and a little bit of the 1950s, and I'm going to start uploading those to my website. And I'll be on mintypineapple.com/consume at some point. So keep an eye out for that.
And as always, I'm Bubbawheat, and you can find me on all social media where I'm at Bubbawheat. At this time, I'm most active on Threads, so that's the best place to find me. And we also have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to have discussions about episodes as they come out, or discussions on past episodes, or any other time loops in TV, movies, anything past, present, or future is all welcome there. And until next time, smoke me a kipper, and I'll regenerate before breakfast next week.